The morning I found the letter, I was standing in my mother's kitchen in rubber gloves, sorting through the drawer she had always called the junk drawer, but which was really the everything drawer. Takeout menus from restaurants that had closed years ago. Dead batteries she kept meaning to recycle. A broken watch that had belonged to someone I never met. It was 3 weeks after her funeral, and I was doing what people do when someone dies, which is clean things up and try not to feel what you are actually feeling. I am 31 now. I was 29 when my mother died. And I am telling you this story because it changed every single thing I thought I knew about who I was and where I came from. The letter was in an envelope that had been opened and refolded so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. My name was on the front. Not my full name, just Lily. Written in handwriting I did not recognize, careful and slanted slightly to the left. The postmark was from a town called Cedar Falls, Iowa. The date on the stamp was June 14th, my birthday. I was 3 years old that June. I stood in that kitchen for a long time before I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was the same. It said, "I think about you every day. I hope she is letting you be happy. If you ever want to find me, I am here. I have always been here. Your father, Russell." My father had died in a car accident when I was 2. That was what my mother had told me. That was what I had believed for 27 years. I sat down on the kitchen floor in my rubber gloves, and I did not move for a very long time. My name is Lily Ashworth. I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, in a brick house on a cul-de-sac, with a mother who worked as a hospital administrator and a stepfather who had entered our lives when I was 6 and left again when I was 14, quietly and without much explanation. My mother and I were not close in the way some mothers and daughters are close. We were functional. We were polite. We shared meals and holidays and occasional phone calls. She came to my college graduation. I visited her at Christmas. When she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, I moved back to Naperville for 8 months to help her through treatment, and when treatment stopped working, I stayed until the end. She never once, in all of those months, mentioned a letter. She never mentioned Russell. She never said anything that cracked open what I now understand was a very carefully maintained version of my own life. I do not know how long I sat on that kitchen floor. Long enough for the afternoon light to shift. Long enough for my knees to ache when I finally stood up. I set the letter on the counter. I pulled off my rubber gloves. I made coffee I did not drink. And then I did the only thing I could think to do, which was call my mother's older sister, my Aunt Cecile, who lived 40 minutes away in Oak Park, and who I had always suspected knew more about our family than she ever offered voluntarily. She picked up on the second ring, and I read her the letter out loud over the phone without any preamble. When I finished, there was a silence on her end that told me everything before she said a word. "Where did you find that?" she said. It was not a question. "In the junk drawer," I said. "Aunt Cecile, what is this?" Another silence, longer this time. "Come over," she said finally. "I'm not doing this on the phone." I drove to Oak Park with the letter on the passenger seat like a passenger. Cecile had always been the quieter sister. My mother was the one who filled rooms, who organized things, who made decisions, and then made everyone else's decisions too. Cecile was the one who sat at the edge of things and watched and kept her thoughts to herself. Her house was small and warm and smelled like the cinnamon candles she burned year-round. She had a pot of coffee already made by the time I knocked on her door. We sat at her kitchen table. She poured 2 cups. She wrapped both hands around hers and looked at me the way someone looks at you when they are deciding how much of a weight they are willing to hand over. "Your father didn't die in a car accident," she said. I had already started to suspect this. Hearing it said out loud was still different. "Then what happened?" I said. She told me. Not all at once. In the careful, halting way of someone who has been holding something for decades and is not sure how it will feel to finally put it down. My mother and my biological father had met when they were both 23. He was from Iowa, she was from Illinois. They had met at a conference in Chicago for something neither of them would have remembered clearly by the time I was born. They were together for 2 years. My mother had gotten pregnant. They were not married. My father, Russell, had wanted to get married. My mother had been uncertain. Not because she did not love him, Cecile said carefully, but because she was uncertain about everything at 25, and Russell was steady and quiet and not very exciting, and she was not sure if she wanted steady and quiet or if she wanted something else. What she chose was something else. His name was my stepfather, though in Cecile's telling he sounded less like a stepfather and more like a category of mistake. He was older, he was established. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and make you feel like you had been chosen for something. My mother chose him when I was 3 months old. She moved us from Chicago to the suburbs. She told Russell she was done. She told me, when I was old enough to ask, that my father had died in an accident. She told that story so cleanly and so consistently that she may have started to believe it herself. Cecile did not say this charitably. She said it the way you say something true that you are not proud of knowing. He wrote to you every year, Cecile said, on your birthday. She showed me the letters once. I don't know how many she kept. Why didn't you tell me? I said. She looked at her coffee cup. Because she was my sister, she said, and because I thought eventually she would tell you herself. I drove back to Naperville that night with something cold and very still sitting in the center of my chest. Not anger, exactly, or not only anger. It was more like the feeling of looking at a room you have lived in your whole life, and suddenly noticing that one of the walls is not where you thought it was. I went back to the drawer. There were 11 letters. 11 envelopes with my name on the front in that same careful leftward handwriting. The earliest was postmarked when I was 3. The most recent was 4 years ago, which meant he had still been writing to an address where I no longer even lived, which meant he had no way of knowing whether I had ever gotten a single one. I read them all that night at the kitchen table with a glass of wine I kept forgetting to drink. They were not dramatic letters. That was the thing that undid me most. They were not angry or accusatory or full of declarations. They were just a man writing to a daughter he could not reach. He mentioned things. The farm he had inherited from his own father outside Cedar Falls, a dog named Patterson who had apparently passed away when I was around 14, a community garden he helped run. His daughter, my half-sister, I understood slowly, who was born when I was 9 and whose name was June. He mentioned being proud of things he had no way of knowing I had done. He mentioned hoping I had friends who made me laugh, and a bedroom I felt safe in. He mentioned missing me in the specific way of someone who misses something they never had the chance to fully hold. The last letter was dated 4 years ago and ended with, I don't know if any of these have reached you. I'm going to keep writing anyway. Some things you do not because you know they will work, but because you would not know yourself anymore if you stopped. I sat with that sentence until the wine was gone and the kitchen was very quiet. The next morning I typed his name into a search engine and found him in approximately 40 seconds. Russell Holt, Cedar Falls, Iowa. He had a small website for a landscaping business he ran. There was a photo on the About page, a man in his mid-50s, standing in front of what looked like a restored farmhouse, squinting slightly into the sun, with the kind of face that does not know it is being photographed. He had my nose, or I had his. Whatever the direction of inheritance, it was unmistakable and strange, and I had to close my laptop and go make toast just to have something to do with my hands. I did not contact him right away. I needed a week. I am not someone who moves toward large emotional events quickly. I needed to sit with what I now knew and let it become real before I added another layer to it. I went to work. I graded papers. I teach 7th grade English in Evanston. I took my regular Thursday evening run along the lakefront. I called Cecile once, and we did not talk about any of it, just talked about ordinary things, and that was what I needed too. At the end of that week, I sat down and wrote him an email. Not a long one. I told him I had found the letters. I told him I had not known. I told him I was not sure what I wanted or what he wanted, but that I thought we were owed a conversation. I hit send before I could revise it into something too careful. He replied in 4 hours. His email was shorter than mine. It said, Lily. I am sitting at my kitchen table reading this and I can't quite make my hands work right. Yes, whenever you're ready. I will come to you or you can come here, whatever feels right. I have been hoping for this for 28 years. I drove to Cedar Falls 3 weeks later. I did not fly. I needed the 4 hours of highway to be alone with myself, to watch Illinois flatten out into Iowa and feel the sky get bigger and think about what I was driving toward. Cedar Falls was smaller than I expected and greener. Late spring, so everything was the particular vivid green that doesn't last. The green that makes you feel like the world is trying its best. I had the address of the farmhouse. My GPS took me down a county road lined with old oaks, and then a gravel driveway, and then I was parked in front of the house from the website photo, and there was a man standing on the porch waiting, because of course he had been watching for my car. I sat in the driver's seat for longer than was probably reasonable. He did not come down from the porch. He gave me that. He just stood there with his hands in his pockets and waited with the patience of someone who has already waited an extremely long time and understands that a few more minutes is nothing. I got out of the car. He said my name once, from the porch, the way you say a word you have been careful with for years. I walked to the porch steps and we stood looking at each other at eye level, and his eyes were doing something complicated, and I imagined mine were too, and then he said, "I made lunch. Come inside. We have a lot to catch up on, and I want to do it at the table if that's all right." That was how it started. We sat at a wooden table in a kitchen with old windows that let in the kind of afternoon light that falls in rectangles across the floor. He had made sandwiches and a pot of soup. The soup was vegetable. The sandwiches were turkey. They were the most ordinary things I had ever eaten. I was intensely grateful for them. He talked. I asked questions and he answered them, and then asked his own and I answered those. He was a careful talker. He chose his words the way someone does when they have had a long time to think about what they would say if they ever got the chance. He told me about his life in a way that did not ask for anything. He was not trying to convince me of anything. He was just filling in the outline, giving me the information I had been owed and had not gotten. He told me that when my mother had ended things, he had tried to maintain contact through a lawyer. He was not aggressive about it, he said, and looking at him I believed this. He was not an aggressive man. He had filed once, formally, for some kind of visitation arrangement, and my mother had moved us and changed her phone number, and the trail had gone cold before the paperwork caught up. He had not had the money to sustain a legal fight that kept moving. So he had written letters, because it was what he could do, because he could not do nothing. I asked him about June. His face changed when I said her name. Not in a bad way, the way a face changes when something good is in it. "She's 22, he said. "She's in her last year at Iowa State. She knows about you. I told her when she was old enough to understand. He paused. She has a lot of feelings about it. Mostly she wants to meet you." I did not expect that to hit the way it did. A 22-year-old girl who knew I existed, who had grown up knowing she had a sister somewhere who did not know she existed, who had feelings about it. I looked out the window at the oak trees in the yard for a moment. "I think I want to meet her too," I said. June drove up from Ames 2 days later, because I had extended my trip by 2 days, which I had not planned to do but which felt necessary. She pulled up in a beat-up Civic with a parking sticker from Iowa State on the back window, and she got out of the car fast, the way young people move, and she stopped when she saw me standing on the porch, and she just stared for a second. "You look like him," she said. "Around the eyes." "I know," I said. "I looked at his website photo for a long time before I drove here." She laughed. It was sudden and real, and I felt something loosen in my chest that I had not known was clenched. We talked for 6 hours that first afternoon. We ate dinner at the kitchen table, the three of us, which was a thing I had never done with a father and a sibling before, and the strangeness of it kept catching me sideways, this simple, ordinary thing that other people do without thinking. We did the dishes together after. June washed, I dried. My father, I was still negotiating that word internally, put things away because he knew where everything went. At one point, June said, without looking up from the sink, "I used to be mad at your mom. Like, genuinely mad. For a long time. I'm less mad now, but I haven't fully worked through it." "You don't have to work through it on my account," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm working through it on my own account." She handed me a pot to dry. "She's gone now, right? Your mom?" "Yeah," I said. 8 months ago." She nodded. "I'm sorry," she said. And I believed her, which surprised me a little, and then didn't. I drove back to Evanston on the 4th day. The drive felt different than the drive down. The sky was the same wide Iowa sky, and the highway was the same highway, but I felt rearranged, in the way you feel rearranged after something true happens to you. I thought about my mother the whole drive back. I want to be careful about this part because I have been careful about it for 2 years now, and I am not sure I will ever be fully done being careful about it. She was not a villain. I am not going to tell you she was a villain because I do not believe that. She was a 25-year-old woman who made a choice that was wrong, and then built a life on top of that choice the way people do, layer by layer, until changing it would have meant dismantling everything. She had cancer for 3 years and then she died. I held her hand at the end. I sang her a song she had liked when I was small, about a river and the sea. I meant it when I did it, I still mean it. And she was also someone who kept 11 letters in a drawer that belonged to me. Who told me a man was dead who was alive and writing to me every year on my birthday. Who built a wall between me and half of who I was and called it protection, or called it nothing, or did not call it anything at all. Both of those things are true. I am learning to hold them both. It is slow work. I talked to my father. I use that word now. It is still a little unfamiliar in my mouth, but it fits better each time. About twice a month. Phone calls, usually on Sunday afternoons. He tells me about the farm, the landscaping business, a project he has going with the community garden. I tell him about my students, about the book I am reading, about the lakefront in winter. We are building something. It is not what it would have been if it had been allowed to grow from the beginning. I know that and he knows that. But it is real and it is ours. And we are both careful with it. June and I text. More than I text most people. She has a dry sense of humor that catches me off guard on a regular basis. She sends me photos of her thesis notes, of a stray cat that has adopted her apartment, of sunsets over the campus. Last month, she drove up to Evanston for a weekend, and I took her down to the lake, and we walked for 2 hours in the cold and talked about everything and nothing, the way you do with someone when the connection is there, but the history is still being filled in. At some point on that walk, she said, "Do you think about what it would have been like if you'd grown up knowing us?" Yeah, I said, but not in a way that makes me sad exactly. More in the way you think about a road you didn't take. You can wonder about it without wishing you had taken it. She was quiet for a minute. "That's a healthier way of thinking about it than I usually manage," she said. "I'm a 7th grade English teacher," I said. "I have thought about narrative a lot." She laughed. "A real one." And we kept walking. I am 31. I have a father I am getting to know at the pace you get to know someone when you start from zero at 29. I have a sister who sends me pictures of her cat and who is, in my honest opinion, one of the more interesting people I have met in my adult life. I have 11 letters in a shoebox in my closet that I sometimes take out and read again, not because I need to, but because they feel like something that should be kept close. The junk drawer of my mother's kitchen is empty now. I cleaned out that whole house. I put what could be donated into boxes, put what could be kept into my car, let go of what needed to be let go of. That is also slow work. I am doing it. What I know now that I did not know the morning I pulled on those rubber gloves is that the people who needed to find each other eventually did. Not because of anything dramatic. Not because of some designed moment of revelation. Because a man wrote letters for 28 years to an address where the person he was writing to could not reach them. And because one of those letters stayed in a drawer instead of being thrown away. And because I happened to clean out that drawer on an ordinary afternoon, 3 weeks after a funeral. Sometimes the thing that finds you has been waiting in the junk drawer the whole time.